Hi there, Caitlin Shanuda here. I have a really interesting and important training today that I think is going to help so many local business owners kind of open up their eyes to the reasons why marketing is what it is in today's day and age, how we got here, and to know best how to market a local business for where we're going next. So this is a longer training. We're going to dive into, some of the big reasons throughout history why marketing has become what it is, the shifts in consumer behavior, and exactly why so much advice that you hear from so many places is rooted in something that used to work really, really well, and exactly why it's not working as well as we want it to today. And just a disclaimer here, this is not like a history of technology or a history of advertising or anything like that. Like, we touch on some of those things, but this is really a history of marketing as it relates to local business and how to utilize that knowledge to make sure that your business stands out today and also for what's to come. Okay, so let's get into it. So, first and foremost, what did marketing used to be? Because, trade has been around, people buying, selling, exchanging goods and services has been around pretty much forever. So, this started out, I'm going to just say pre-1800s, but, it goes back as far as, humanity goes back, essentially, right? Like, as long as we did things together and we needed things, we were in this trade era where, there was still marketing, okay? It was all about your reputation, the quality of your goods, who you had relationships with, who was helping you sell them, right? Like, so I'm thinking of like, Silk Road, Spice Road, right? Like, let's say kind of early days of like what I would call very heavy, like commerce that, goods were being exchanged more than just like hand to hand. It was all about who you knew and how people talked about you. It was about your ability to negotiate. It was about your ability to qualify, the quality of your goods and also what made them stand out and different than others. This is kind of how we as, humans have built our relationship with products and services. And it wasn't really like a true, marketing strategy as we think of it today, right? But the ones who really stood out, who were super successful before, the era of what we think of as marketing, it still was built on that ability to really understand what made customers want to buy your specific goods or services, and making sure that you had the relationships and you knew how to talk about it in such a way that you could get that done. So let's enter, era of production. So we'll say this kind of started to come into play, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. So early 1800s. And it lasted for a good long time. We'll kind of talk that through. But, in terms of local marketing, what did that mean? If you were visible, you could just basically hang your shingle out. You say, hey, I'm a blacksmith. I can wash your laundry. I can, make the best biscuits in town, right? Like, if you were open for business and customers knew that you were open for business, like, that was kind of the initial way that a local business got customers. Obviously, things like word of mouth, again, those relationships, being known for having the best of what you did or for being fair with your prices, like that sort of thing helped. But marketing as we know it was more about just being there, being visible, making sure that people knew that you had whatever you were selling, it was available in the area. More often than not, there was only one or two options, right? So like, if I'm using like the Old West, I'm from Wyoming, right? Like, you think about a Western town, like there was like one blacksmith, one saloon, one post office. As long as it was there, they were getting business, whether they were great or not. Like, they just had to be available and made sure their customers knew that they were there. Same thing for entertainment, for whether they were like hosting a play or a poker tournament or whatever. Like, you stick the shingle out, people knew you were there, they were coming in. This is really where this like relationship between community and customer started, right? Is like, you knew if you went into town and you needed something, you were going to find it because that person had made it obvious that they existed, they were open for business. And that continued, I'd say regardless of, kind of advances in industrial technology, like that sort of thing. Like that was really how marketing worked for about, 100, 150 years or so. When we get into the early 1900s with, invention of the printing press, and then also explosion of more and more manufacturing in, later part of the Industrial Revolution, is when we start to see the rise of advertising, true advertising. So actually making sure that it wasn't just that customers knew about you, you were kind of like trying to explain what made your product so great in an actual print medium versus just saying it out loud, word of mouth, building that relationship with customers. Still super limited media channels, right? Like this was things like flyers. Early magazines had very limited delivery. It was being, given out basically hand to hand in whatever community you were living in, whether that large or small. These are the early days of advertising, but it is the first example and instance of someone trying to take what they do well, the reasons why someone would buy from you, and put that into words that actually get customers to take action. This is actually a pretty important evolution in terms of marketing, right? Because it started to force business owners and advertisers, anyone doing this, to try to put into words that which was just kind of accepted before this, right? Like, again, prior to this, like, rise of advertising, it was like if people knew you existed, they were probably going to come. Now, there starts to be this idea that we have got to get customers interested in order to get them to come. And this was still, again, because there were very limited media channels, this was mostly print. This was even pre-billboard, right? Like this was just like these, locally produced, magazines, newspapers, flyers, like that sort of thing being circulated to however many people they could get them into the hands of in a local community. So you still knew that you were getting in front of people that like could physically come in and buy. And it was almost just an expansion of like, hang your shingle out. It's like, hey, we're here. We are still best in town for what we do. These are the reasons why. It was a little bit more of a, spray and pray method, throw some spaghetti at the wall, make sure that people are understanding that we're here, and a certain percentage of them are going to come in and buy. But, it's important because it's like, it's the first time that we're actually thinking about marketing for marketing's sake versus just like, listen, I'm around. Here's where to come if you need your horse shod. I'm sticking with the Old West when I'm talking about those 1800s, I guess. And then this gave rise to, right around 1920 through 1950 to what is known in many like marketing historian channels as like the sales era. And so I want you to think about, this was again, like quantity over quality almost when it comes to thinking about how the marketing was, distributed. So I want you to think about like Henry Ford, right? Like every single place across the country had something to say. Like he had advertising and marketing in, billboards, flyers, and magazines across the country. And his marketing was, this is for every person, right? And it wasn't necessarily like a relationship builder or anything. It was just like, this is new, this is cool. I'm going to put it everywhere. And this expanded, all the way up through, mid-century in the 1900s, where there was just this attitude of like, if you put it out there, they will come. And so it was like billboards, it was radio, it was magazines, it was then television, everything that you think of in terms of like kind of the expansion of media in the early 20th century. This period is where marketing kind of started exploding, and just anyone who was like putting the word out there and having the most visibility won. They won the customers. And so this was an evolution, of course, of like the idea that you had to advertise. Now is just like, well, now let's just advertise more on as many channels as we possibly can. And this gave rise to what is known as the marketing era. All right, so now we are mid-century. We're starting to see what I will call the birth of modern marketing here. So in that sales era where mass marketing exploded in the 20s through 50s, what happened is the market became saturated, right? Like people were making a lot of money. Obviously dips and ebbs and flows in the economy, right? But like that's not necessarily what has made or broken a business, right? Like the economy can be tough, it is an external force. If you understand how to market to people who actually are interested and able to buy what you sell, you can weather those. And this is kind of an example of that. I love this timeline for that reason. But when we start thinking about the 50s, it was at the end of the, boom after the Second World War, or sorry, it was at the beginning of the boom after the Second World War, baby boomer era. We're starting to see like so much prosperity in general. And that means more and more people trying to throw their hat in the game. And so what that means is more competition and just being, out there, mass marketing, just being on a channel, being on radio, being on a billboard, it started to not work as well. And so this gave rise to, what a lot of people talk about as like the customer first mindset. And so what this did is like really shift, here's the features and benefits, here's why we're better than everybody else, like way of talking about a product or service, to here's what it can do for you. Here's how you're going to feel. Like this is a really kind of cool and interesting example of that. This is an ad from the 1960s for McDonald's. You deserve a break today. Really, really good example of customer first marketing where, you know what? It's probably not going to change your entire life, but like if you just have had a rough day and you want something that tastes good and feels fizzy on your tongue, like you deserve that break today. Very good example of the type of messaging that I talk about in all of my programs today, right? Like you deserve a break today. This is customer first. This is in your head. This is trying to make you have an emotional connection to that business so you actually come in and buy. This is really the first time that you see businesses, especially local businesses, focusing on that, like, idea that because we're here, because we're local, we're the best option for you, right? Like it's customer first, and that partly equals we're here for you in your community. And this is important as we start talking about, the continued evolution of marketing. So, honestly, like up through the 80s, even past the point where the internet kind of came into being, like that was really the focus of marketing, was that relationship building, like, being inside customers' heads, making them feel like they were understood. And then in 1993, what happened is we actually had our first web browser. And this was the first time that marketing went digital. And this wasn't widely adopted at this point, but it's significant because it started to change how consumers interacted with the world, right? Now, I don't necessarily have to open my newspaper to understand what's going on around me. I can access, a search engine, a chat room, what have you, and interact with people who might be local, who might not. And that gave rise in the late 90s to SEO as we know it. Obviously a primitive version of this, but like it was all about keywords. This is where you start to have your very first websites that are doing keyword stuffing, like as many times as you can put the word wombat in, and the wombat's going to show up, or your website's going to show up every time somebody Googles the word wombat. Sorry, Google didn't exist yet. Every time somebody searches the word wombat. Silly example, but like this is where digital marketing as we know it today really started, is this idea that there was information out there and I had to put a series of, search terms, keywords into some form of search engine, and I could start to access my own research, my own information, versus just like relying on what was outside my door. This is where consumer behavior starts to shift, away, like first time since the 1800s, basically, with this local visibility. This is the first time that consumer behavior starts to really shift into looking outside of their local communities for information. This becomes really, really relevant as we get closer to today's day and age. All right, huge one. 1998, Google launches their search engine and changes marketing and the internet as we know it. I'm not going to go into a history of Google. That is definitely not what this video is about, but they were revolutionary for a few reasons. One is it took this idea of a search engine, like there were various kind of examples of like places and ways to find information on the internet previous to 1998, but it kind of involved you first navigating to a website and then knowing which search terms you wanted, and then hoping that there was something on that website that could help you with that. Google arrives and it crawls multiple websites to find you the information from all of these other places. In addition to that, and really, really relevant to local, we now have location-based targeting for the first time. So it's not just information, it brings this idea of what's in my city, what's in my neighborhood onto the internet. And it absolutely changed digital marketing forever, because now you could take what used to work back here, right? Like essentially we are back into this idea of, mass marketing, targeting people in your local area with like a billboard and a magazine and whatever. And now we put it on the internet because we can say, hey, everyone in Atlanta, Georgia, for example, should be seeing these keywords. So it was kind of like building off of what came before, right? Like, and this is kind of the point of this history, this video, started out like if you had relationships, you had sales. And then if you, had a way to put an ad on in the magazine and let people know that you were there, you had sales. And then if you were everywhere, you had sales. And then now we have to focus on the customer, and that gets you sales. Now we're changing customer behavior, changing the way they search for information and making it available to them online, and also making it available for brands, for businesses, for marketers to start buying ads and target them based on location, the same way that you did here with something like radio or billboards. And, radio and billboards don't become obsolete till much, much later. We'll get there. But, this is where you start to see that first shift towards, consumer behavior. They're changing how and where they're looking for their information. And this starts to change the way that they interact with businesses and brands, especially local, as early as 1998. Something else happened in the early 2000s, which is that Amazon got into the internet game specifically with algorithms and personalized recommendations. So they're starting to understand that, if someone buys something once, they're going to like something like it twice. They're serving them true, targeted, segmented, personalized recommendations. This is the first time in marketing history where this happens. And this becomes very significant because this algorithm, this idea of being able to serve someone information, marketing that they're going to be personally interested in versus just kind of like trying to make it as widely seen as possible and hope someone interacts with it. This is the first time that we actually see someone in marketing, so a big business or brand, they are actually looking at the future saying, hey, if I can influence my customers to behave differently utilizing my advertising, I can influence them into buying products on my platform. Now, that is significant because I didn't say buy from my brand, right? I said buying products on my platform. So prior to this, absolutely everything in the production era, in the marketing era, all of it was centered around a business, whether that's a big brand or a local business, interacting with your business specifically, with your product or service specifically. Amazon and Google started changing that to, we're pulling in information from multiple different sources, and we are serving it up to the customer where they now get to make some choices based off of all of the things they see in front of them. Again, this is really the birthplace of what has become our digital marketing world of today. And it started happening as early as the early 2000s. All right. This actually has changed the world as we know it when it comes to marketing. Now, we think of Facebook obviously as a social media platform, and it is, but actually they did something insanely significant right kind of at the end of the .com boom. And they launched a social media platform that collected a ton of customer data. And we didn't necessarily know it in 2003 that this was happening. We didn't understand the significance of it. Whether or not our buddy Zuck did or not, we don't know, right? Like, he's not admitting to this being a master plan, but I would suggest it probably was. But now we have the idea that because you have this interaction and this social nature of a website, it's worth giving over your personal data to that entity. And it's okay if it uses it, right? Again, massive, massive shift in how consumers interacted with the internet, but also the power of the internet to interact with consumers. And this is something you're going to see me keep going through the rest of this timeline. Facebook, whether they are a change maker or whether they are following a trend, they continue to have massive, massive influence on how individuals interact with different platforms, and especially how local businesses are able to interact with their customers back and target them back. Hugely significant. We're entering another era very, very shortly after, because Facebook was so powerful. It was proven, how much you could get individuals to actually interact with a different platform. Like we're past just like, put out a blog with a recipe on it, right? In 2005, YouTube was founded, and it exploded, and it changed consumer behavior forever, because now we are in our content era. It's not enough just to put some information with some keywords out on the internet and assume someone's going to interact with it. Now we have to actually entertain them. And YouTube proved very, very quickly that this was something customers wanted a lot of, whether you were local, whether you were a big brand. If you were able to show up and have relevant content that, again, went back to location-based targeting, keywords, algorithms, and personalization, all the things, like we're kind of like building blocks, as it were, into the current digital marketing ecosystem. YouTube shifted not just the way customers interacted with the internet, but it shifted the way that brands started thinking about interacting with their customers. And it started utilizing some of that customer data. This is one of the first algorithms that, Amazon previous to that had thought about, like, their algorithm as a way to sell you something, right? Like if you bought this product, then I'm going to show you this one because it's kind of similar. YouTube said, hey, you watch this content, this is similar. Now I'm going to show you this. Now, because you interacted with that, I'm going to show you this. And it kept people on the platform longer. It was the first time that content actually was being promoted for content's sake. And this built on Facebook's idea, right? Like, you liked this person, you'd probably like this person, and it like expanded, like the connections and the reach beyond local. Now YouTube is expanding consumer behavior where we're keeping them on a single platform longer because they're seeing more and more and more content that was relevant for, creators. It was relevant for brands. It was relevant for people who were, giving how-to videos as a way to sell their services. It just literally changed nearly overnight how consumers interacted with social media. In 2006 came Twitter. This kind of expanded that idea, right? Where, if you're interacting with videos, you'll probably interact with, all these like little sound bites of information that you can just share back and forth and back and forth. And then Facebook changed everything again by adding paid media in 2007. Now, this really ushered in what I call the social media era, because now brands and local businesses, for the first time, have the opportunity to target customers on social media platforms. It's not just, let me put some content out and, it's part of my SEO strategy. It's like, I can now use the data that has been collected and target customers specifically. But we're still really kind of like in this era through all of this of like, it's all really based on content, information, keywords, SEO, right? Like, but it's getting more and more and more sophisticated where, Facebook, again, leads the way in a lot of these different platforms of like seeing how can I capitalize on this to actually make money. Smart businesses saw that as an opportunity for their business to utilize the new technology and keep going with their business, keep building more customers with their business, have more ways that they're seen by customers. This is important, right? Because what happens after 2007? We had the, giant real estate economic crash. There were so many businesses that actually were able to capitalize on the success of Facebook's paid media to keep their doors open in, 2008 through 2010. Now, I say this for a reason, because businesses who kind of see the trends and are, you don't necessarily have to be a trend innovator or leader, but like the longer you wait, right, every single time you see one of these, it often coincides with something that maybe isn't so great for business. And so if you're hoping that things go back to the old way, like that's been proven again and again and again, right? From the 1800s through, advertising, sales, customer first, internet, all of that, we only go forward. And every single thing that has come before is kind of a building block for what comes after. Like all of this idea of like getting your brand out there, having it on as many channels as possible, looking at the customer first, going beyond local, looking at the ways that customers are interacting with media, algorithms, all of this personalization, having things be very targeted towards a specific customer's mindset and needs. That all builds off of everything that came before. And that's another reason it doesn't go back, right? Like paid media on Facebook changed the internet forever, because we could use the customer data for the first time to also build on this idea of personalization, location-based targeting, everything that Google, Amazon had done before. And now we are very sophisticated in how we are getting in front of our customers, and we can spend a lot less than we would have to do just doing location-based targeting or SEO, for example, and still have customers see the business. So then what happened? Now we're in our social media era, which, invited more platforms. Instagram was launched in 2010, and it was at its launch essentially just a content platform, but very quickly became a place where brands were aware and local businesses were aware that they could post and create that good content, and make money. This was the early days of like, if I've got a really good assortment and I put it on Instagram, enough people are going to see it that they're going to buy. Now, Instagram also gave way to Snapchat. It was kind of like the same idea, but like now it's bite-sized. A lot of businesses and brands, like you could kind of like influence like quick buying behavior, right? By the fact that this was only available. That led to Instagram stories, Instagram live, all sorts of things were influenced on Instagram and Facebook because of Snapchat. But ultimately what happened to usher us into the influencer era is that in 2016, TikTok was launched. And this didn't completely turn everything on its head overnight, but again, it influenced the algorithms and the way that content was shown to customers on all of these other channels, because TikTok immediately proved that they were better than everyone else at keeping consumers, people, viewers on their platforms longer. And so everyone else started copying the TikTok algorithm to keep people on their platform longer. And then the more successful they were at that, the more they realized that it was a paid media game. So now you have to spend money to boost, is how it started, right? Get your content seen by more people. Then it was an algorithm change where, now nothing is sequential. It's just like literally it's needing you to beat the algorithm from everyone else, whether that's a big box brand, an influencer, somebody else. Like your content has to be so much better than everybody else's, or you're not getting views, which led to this, we're in this like clickbait era, right? Like whatever I can do to get you to stop the scroll and click on my content and whatever, like that's what wins in organic social media. And social media has even replaced things like search, right? Like people are getting on Instagram, on TikTok to say, hey, where should I go for dinner tonight in Denver, for example. So this really, again, shifted consumer behavior. It's not just where they're spending their time, it's how they're interacting with content, it's how they're utilizing other platforms, right? Like this social media and influencer era changed the way that consumers interact with information forever. And brands and businesses who are on that train, right? Like you might have been successful selling something on Instagram in 2010 or 2015, for example, because if you posted it, like people were going to see it. This day and age, because of what has happened with TikTok and influencers, it's changed absolutely every other platform out there. And we're not going back, right? Because now these platforms are making a ton of money because Facebook figured out how to take all of this consumer behavior, consumer data, and force brands to pay for those views. And if you're just paying for views, obviously that doesn't translate into foot traffic. So like the ones who are best at it understand this, right? Like this focus on relationships, making sure that you're really giving customers what they truly want in your content. You see how this all builds. All right. This is significant in the same way that, the World Wide Web being launched in 1993 is significant. The very first generative AI that was widely available to consumers was GPT-3. So obviously precursor to ChatGPT, launched in 2020. It wasn't really used for marketing. It was almost more kind of like the internet was back in the early days, right? People who are really into tech were like, oh, this is cool. I can kind of interact with AI for the first time, kind of like people were interacting with chat rooms in 1993. But the thing that is significant that I want you to understand here is internet's been around since the late 60s, accessible, like computers and internet accessible to consumers in general since the 80s. Our first true actual platform that you could navigate in 1993, and Google changed everything from a digital perspective in 1998. It's like a 30-40 year time span. That is significant because our first option as consumers to interact one-to-one with AI was in 2020. And so these next several timeline points are really something local businesses especially need to pay attention to, because everything that worked before, we're not going back to that, right? These are building blocks. Consumers and advertisers, everybody who is trying to sell anything in the world, is building off of what came before to make it better and better and better. And all of this that happened in the content, social media, and influencer eras have changed consumer behavior to, an insane level where they're just not interacting with anything the same way that they used to. It's not just customer first. It's not just making sure that you have a billboard or an advertisement out there. It's making sure that you're where they're consuming their information so that they see where they're spending their time. And so, 1993 through about 2016 was kind of all building off of this idea of digital marketing as it used to be, which utilized a lot of the same kind of frameworks and mindsets that used to work on all these other channels, on radio, on billboards, on magazines, other types of advertisement. Now it went online and you could do very similar things and it still worked. Influencers changed how people interacted with social media. And now in 2020, our first generative AI accessible to consumers lands on the stage. And then in 2021, love him or hate him, here comes Zuck again. He announced that Facebook was now Meta, and he was going all in on virtual reality and AI. Now, this is significant for a few reasons, one of which is it was kind of a shift and an indication that he was about to break social media with new algorithms and with allowing AI into all of this customer data, which is exactly what's happened, okay? And this, from a business perspective, means two things. It means, again, one, we cannot go back. Every single one of these things is a building block. AI is here to stay. Whether or not Zuck's version of virtual reality ever comes to pass or not remains to be seen. I wouldn't put it past him. He's done a lot of things that people didn't think were possible over the years. Not a Zuck fan. I'm just looking at data. Okay. What I want you to get out of this is Meta jumping on the AI train, making it something that is not just available to consumers, but now is also utilizing his massive, massive platform to influence consumers and their behavior, is an indication of where we're going, right? Facebook absolutely changed everything in 2003 and then again in 2007 because it made it accessible to brands as an advertising platform. Now in 2021, Meta has jumped on the AI train. So Meta becoming Meta instead of Facebook did not break the internet overnight, but it was the first, I will say, humbling block that kind of took everything that came before it down, okay? Because this is one of the most powerful platforms in terms of consumer targeting, customer data. One of the best and easiest ways to reach customers with paid media and see your results, right? Like it literally is one of the most effective platforms to advertise in the world. Again, love him or hate him. I'm not saying that I'm like a Facebook fan necessarily. I'm saying as a local business, we have to understand the tools available to us and the reasons why they're effective or not effective. So Meta's AI did a couple different things. One is it allowed the algorithm to be much more sophisticated and much more attuned to customer behavior than just utilizing an algorithm based on customer data. Okay, it was like real time, how many people are interacting with this type of content, what type of things are they clicking on, how can we personalize that? And as it learned from that, like it's gotten more and more and more sophisticated. You'll hear me talk in other videos, I'll link them here, about the consumer mindset shift of, summer of 2024. A lot of this was a result of Meta kind of getting better and better and better at AI and changing how customers are thinking about the world, not just interacting with their social media. Again, they are scrolling on their phones so much that they're utilizing things like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as their search engines now. And those search engines, because of AI, because it wasn't just Meta, right? Like every single thing is now utilizing AI in their algorithms. They are able to understand what a customer wants almost better than that customer knows themselves what they want. What this means as a local business is not just that you need to be posting on these channels, but that you need to be utilizing them for what they're really, really, really good at, which is serving up content that customers really are going to relate to and interact with on a big, massive scale. And so this shift, between what happened with that first generative AI, GPT-3, and Meta jumping on the AI and VR bandwagon, is that we have officially entered the era of AI. And the reason why this is a column of many colors is because AI, again, love it or hate it, I'm not necessarily promoting AI as like this is the next best thing, right? I'm just looking at data telling you, after my 20-year career in marketing and really studying this stuff, we have to be on board with this and able to utilize it if we want our business to be visible to local customers. And again, it's going to happen at the speed of light. It took hundreds of years to get to where we are, one thing building upon the next. And like literally 5 years into like the first time that we were really thinking about AI, it's taking over. So in 2023, ChatGPT rolled out. I had someone ask me like around the time that this launched if I was like worried that it was going to take my job as a marketer. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, no, like all it does is give me an employee that's much cheaper and, potentially more effective if I use it right. But it cannot replace what I know about my customers, how I talk to local businesses about how to get that feeling of what really makes a customer interested in their business. ChatGPT at best can execute on that if you're directing it right. But that's where AI is going, right? It needs direction and very, very specific utilization prompts, like ways that you are telling it to do what you want, telling it to find the right customer, targeting people, making sure that it understands what your customers really, really respond to. Like that aspect of a local business is never going to go away. The internet, AI, digital media cannot replace that. But if we're not using digital media in the way that consumers are, your business gets more and more and more invisible. And then obviously, I'm going to have to move my head here. Something incredibly significant happened in 2025. It also has completely changed the world in the same way that, having internet changed the world in the 90s. We now have AI-driven search dominating every digital platform. So what this means is it's not just keyword driven. I'm not saying that SEO completely disappeared or that you don't need a Google My Business page, with that location based targeting, right? Like there's the reason why Google is still the standard. But now you're not showing up unless you have the content and the algorithm based strategies to show up for AI. Because every platform from Facebook to Google to Bing to Snapchat to TikTok to Instagram to Twitter, doesn't matter what somebody types into a search bar, AI is spitting out the answer, which means that we have to understand how AI works. And again, for a local business, the way that this works and actually drives customers to your business is all about that connection point, understanding the mindset and the behaviors of your ideal customers. But again, we're not going back, right? Google changed the internet forever in 1998. AI has changed the world forever in 2025. It's no longer enough to just post content on social media or put up a billboard or, even put out a sidewalk sign or a storefront sign. Consumers are getting their information from digital channels, and AI is what's giving it to them. And so what is the future? Well, we are in the era of AI. I don't know exactly what comes next in 20 years, but I predict we are going to stay here and get more and more sophisticated for at least the next 5 to 10 years. If we are looking at this timeline, right? Like hundreds of years to 100 to, 30. I think that AI is going to continue to dominate, and it's going to get more and more and more sophisticated. The sooner that we are able to use these channels to get in front of our customers, the better off you're going to be. Same as someone who understood how to run paid ads in 2007 versus those who were just kind of like hoping that people knew about them during the housing crisis, right? Same in COVID, right? Like those who were really, really active on social media during that era, man, they made a lot of money. I worked with them. I was one. That's how we moved huge amounts of product for clients when everyone was closed down, was just social media. But we are not in that era anymore. We are in the era of AI. And so what does that mean for a local business? If AI is mainstream, it means that we have to focus on visibility, relevance, and volume. This means that understanding exactly what your customer wants is more important than ever. And honestly, most business owners that I work with do understand that. Like you have a connection with your customer when they're standing in front of you. You understand how to keep that relationship going in person. The hard part is translating that not just into a marketing message, right? It's not just this focus on relationships or the way that, we were talking about marketing 150 years ago, products, benefits, services, right? Like all of that is kind of antiquated thinking. Now it's the ability to tell something like Facebook's, Meta's ads dashboard, which is all run off of a very sophisticated AI, how to talk to your customers so that they come into your business, right? So when we think about visibility, relevance, and volume, it's being seen on as many platforms as possible, which is still a paid ads game, right? Like Facebook changed that forever and then again. And it is making sure that the content and the message is so dialed in that that AI is able to do what it does best and really show them exactly why they should be in love with your business. Now, this is something that isn't as easy to do as a lot of local businesses might think, right? Like that's 90% of what I do with most clients that I work with in person is we're taking what makes you so good at, connecting with customers when they're in front of you and turning that into content that actually gets their attention online, and then actually knowing how to utilize the power of those automations, that AI, those algorithms to make sure that you're visible in so many places and it understands why you're relevant to your customer with their specific mindsets and behaviors. And this, as I mentioned, right, like you can kind of see in this timeline how condensed all of this has gotten. This is the time to really focus on learning how to do this now. Not even in January, right? Like we're coming up on Q4 of 2025. I have a lot of businesses I'm talking to who are assuming that because it's the holidays, consumers are going to behave like they did in the past, you can see how little that is relevant here. They're not behaving like they were in the past. And the big brands are launching their campaigns earlier and earlier. The way that the internet works is it's just changing how consumers are looking for information. So if they're looking for something to do over the holidays, they're not searching their local business listings. They're getting on TikTok or Instagram. So we have to show up utilizing the tools at our disposal where consumers are spending their time. And because AI has completely started to dominate the way that information is shown to them, we've got to make sure we are utilizing it to its fullest potential, which is more than just, utilizing ChatGPT as a glorified search engine, right? So if you're interested in more information for how to do this as we move through, what the future is, where AI is mainstream for a local business, I've got a lot of resources for business owners. First and foremost, join my Skool group. Link is below. This is a complete build out of how to build this, from messaging to the ways to utilize AI, ChatGPT, Facebook's algorithm, Google's algorithms, how to show up in AEO or AI-driven search. All of that is included. And then also, I have a free call for any local business looking for more personalized strategies. We're not going to sell you anything on this call. It's just a way to help you implement this in your business for your specific situation. So I always say, leave your credit card in the freezer, book your free 15-minute call, let my team point you in the right direction, and join my free Skool group for more information like this about how to successfully navigate this crazy world that we live in, where AI is the future for a local